What about making yours sound better?
Hello everybody, this is Jerry Mateo with WA Productions, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving my review of the brand new Babylon from WA Productions. Now, this plugin has been out for a couple weeks, and I've taken a little bit of time to really get to know this plugin. And it's really cool. It has a very interesting design and a very interesting way of working. But as far as I can tell, this is a very flexible plugin with a very easy to use layout. Now, Babylon has a ton of features, and one of the biggest ones is the fact that everything can be controlled in one page. You don't have to go through a bunch of menus and submenus. You simply click on what you want and it's going to pop up right there and you can control it. Very simple, very easy. Now, this also boasts 257 different waveforms to choose from when you are controlling your oscillators. Now, this has a bunch of sine waves, triangle waves, saw waves, square waves, pulse widths, voicings, formants, instruments, gritty sounds, and even gates. So this has a ton of features. It also comes with over 2,300 presets. And a lot of the presets in the factory bank I've noticed are very much focused on allowing you to manipulate the way that it sounds and creating your own overall sound. While the expanded library is more already created sounds from previously made songs and genres of music. So if you're looking for something that's just plug and play and ready to go, I highly recommend the tutorial presets or the demo presets. Those are really good. But if you're really going into trying to dive deep and create your own tones, check out the factory banks. They are a good starting off point with a lot of flexibility to move on from there. Now, this is obviously a polyphonic synthesizer, which means that you can simply click on where it says Max Poly and choose the polyphony of the plugin. You can have up to 16 notes at once being played, and you can even make it a monophonic synth by simply clicking 1. Now for the modes, we have Poly, which is polyphonic, we have Legato, Legato no retrigger, Porta, Polyporta, and we have the option to lock Porta and grid. And then finally we have the transposition tool, which will allow us to transpose up and down by 12 steps, which is great if you're utilizing something like a very small MIDI keyboard and banking between things is kind of inconvenient, or if you're like me and you're a guitar player who has a MIDI guitar, so you play through a little guitar that turns your playing into MIDI, and it only has, I think, 8 frets, so I'm really very limited. So that is where the transposition really does help. Now, as far as the controls go, this is a very simple and easy synthesizer to use. It just looks a little bit complex. You have 3 oscillators to choose from, and these can all be on at once. Every single one of these has the exact same controls, so we're just going to focus on one, and then we're going to move on to the sections that are a little bit more unique. So the way that you choose your shape is you simply click on it. So let's go for something like a pulse width. We'll do pulse width 3, and let's just listen to it. Pretty simple, right? Let's bring it down an octave. In fact, we'll bring it down 2. Also very simple, right? Now you're able to change the octave by up to 3 steps. So you can bring it up and down 3 steps. You can bring it up and down by 12 steps as far as semitones. And then for the fine-tuned controls, you have 100, which is pretty standard. Double clicking will reset anything back to normal. And then you have more controls like pitch, phase, panning, and volume. And this is where you can really choose where to have every synth. So if you're using all 3 oscillators, you can really just have them panned and phase aligned a little bit differently to sound very wide and stereo. And then you can control the volume to basically make a overall dry-wet blend of all 3. Now, another really cool feature is the fact that since we have all this control, let's say we do something like this, we can obviously reverse the waveform, and we can even invert the phase. This means that if you have 2 oscillators that are very similar and you invert the phase, you can get a completely different sound. You also have free control. It kind of makes things seem a little bit more analog. The next feature that is only on the first 2 oscillators is the Unison feature. Now this is adding voicings and detuning. So you can detune up to 100% and you can have up to 9 voices. But keep in mind that having the detune set so high will cause a little bit of issues. Let's listen to it with the detune set at 100 with 9 voices. That sounds a little bit aggressive, right? So let's bring the detuning down to something simple like 12. That sounds more like aggressive chorusing. I like that a lot better. The next step is we can simply sync all of them up so that it detunes the same way. And that gives you a very warm, rounded sound. I really like that. The next step is controlling the stereo spread. And then the dry wet control for this. Next is having FM, AM, or RM synthesis and noise being added to the signal. So if you turn on the FM synthesis and you play a note, let's say we'll play this one. We bypass it. It's not doing a lot, right? But let's turn it on and change the amount of FM synthesis. It changes the sound. The same thing happens when we activate the AM and RM synthesis. And obviously, when the third oscillator turns green, that means that it's now controlling the synthesis sections. So now we can change the octave, do a little bit of pitch shifting and phase shifting. And it will obviously change the way that things work. Notice that in these sections, the panning and volume isn't really doing anything, and that's because you're controlling the amount by these three little knobs right here. Another thing that's really cool is the third oscillator, instead of having control for unison, it has added noise control. So if we turn these three off and just turn on the noise control, pretty simple. It has width control, panning, and volume. And then finally, we have the ADSR, or the attack, decay, sustain, release of the plugin. This also has the master output, and this is something that we can lock so it won't change when we change presets. This is a great way of overall shaping the tone and the way that the synthesizer is going to react to incoming notes, making it a lot smoother or a lot more harsh. But you also have the added control for the attack, decay, and release to have different types of curves. You have linear, exponential curves, pluck curves, double curves. It's pretty standard and really cool. It adds a lot of flexibility and unique characters. The filter section is really simple. You click on it and you choose one of the 5 filters: low pass, band pass, high pass, notch, or peak filters. But the thing that makes this really cool is when you use the cut control, it moves the frequency, and the resonance will choose the Q or width of the filter that you've chosen. So if I play something again, it's pretty straightforward. But one thing that's really interesting is if you bring up the key, now the next bit of control, which is right after this, is the effect. If we go onto the menu above it, we have saturation, overdrive, distortion, bitrate reduction, and sample reduction. And bringing this up and down simply adds more or less. We also have an envelope control, which basically allows us to choose at what point is this going to actually change. Pretty cool. You can actually create really interesting auto-wahs with this. And then we have the attack, decay, sustain, release of the envelope. And it does have the same options as the overall control right here. So this means that we can actually make this act very slowly and hold. And let's just see how that sounds. You essentially create an envelope follower with the filter section. Of course, we can lock this section right here. And the next step is the channel strip. Now this is all the effects. And the way that this works is you simply click on the effect and it will allow you to control those effects. You can turn them on and off, and they all have individual control, and some of them even have separate controls for filters and filter types. You can lock this section, but a really cool thing is because this is essentially a channel strip, you can control the order that these effects are going to be placed. Lastly, we have a limiter, and then we have the glide section, which controls the amount of glide we have. Now, under that, we have the keyboard, matrix, modulation, and tuner section. Keyboard is basically just going to show you what's being played. And then pitch control is pitch control. Modulation is very important for controlling the modulation of things. I highly recommend utilizing this when you're messing with the detuning or the pitch control. And then the matrix is where you add controls like LFOs, different types of oscillation for volumes or various controls. And you can even have stuff like mod wheel, velocity, key tracking, and aftertouch. So this has a lot of controls and is really great for adding MIDI CC control with your MIDI controller. The modulators is pretty simple. You have 2 LFOs, 2 envelopes, and a vibrato control. The envelopes have ADSR, and this obviously has the same controls and different curves as the other ones. And this is essentially where you can just add some more flavor and color and texture. The final section is the tuner. Now, this is the most powerful section, in my opinion, because this kind of borrows some of the features from Instascales and Instachords and changes them up just a little bit. You can obviously change your scale. So let's say we want to be in a minor pentatonic of D sharp. It'll show us, by highlighting them in a lighter shade, what notes are in that scale. And we have different forms of locking that. We can have cheat 1, which is going to mute the keys that are not in the scale, or cheat 2, which is going to replace them with the notes that are in the scale. Versus off. Pretty cool. But what really makes this interesting is you can change the tuning of the notes. This means that you can technically be in a certain scale, but you can use the tuning to make it out of that scale and create your own individual scale. This is also allowing us to now have Arabic, Asian, and Middle Eastern style scales, which is really cool because they sound awesome. Those types of scales are very unique and have a very, very interesting tone to them. By loading up this Iraq scale, you can see that it has detuned things a little bit, and if I set it to cheat 2, versus normal. Cheat 2. And this is actually one of my favorite things because I can now create my own individual scales, use a scale that is based off of a different style of playing or a different country's music, and then tweak it to make it fit what I think is cool. That's enough of the overall overview. Let's show you some sound examples. So I have a melody right here. If we play it really quickly. It's really simple, but let's say I want to change it to a different scale. So for this case, we're going to go for the Nava scale in G sharp and do cheat 2. Let's change it to something else. Pretty cool. Now, obviously, this doesn't really showcase how cool this could be because this is just a couple of notes being played. But if you have this with your entire orchestration, you can essentially turn a normal performance in C sharp into something completely different in G sharp with a very interesting type of scale. I'm going to unmute everything and just play this very, very simple progression that I wrote. So it's very simple, but check out how cool it is. I have 4 different instances of Babylon. I have one on the melody, one for bass, one for pluck, and one for chords. And of course, all I did is simply choose a couple of presets, and I did some slight modifications. So if you notice, when you see this little star on any of them, that means that you've modified the preset. Now, of course, I'm utilizing a lot of the expanded presets because they're very, very good sounding. But again, if you're trying to do your own thing, I highly recommend checking out the factory presets, where it just showcases a general idea and gives you the freedom to change everything. That's going to be it for this video. This is Jerry Mateo with WA Productions. I will see you guys next time. Bye.